question for me. Apart from the obvious, what is the difference between wild deer and the... Oh, actually, you know what? I'm sorry, I thought I answered this. It was asked, I think, on the drive yesterday, and then I think something came up. Sorry about that. Apart from the obvious is the interesting part. What is the obvious differences? I presume the main ones and the obvious ones may be the same. Is the horns? That's always the first thing I think of. The horns with deer is typically they shed the horns and they grow back very fast, and it's actually a different kind of bone. It's a very specific bone. It's the fastest growing bone that you find in the animal world, some kind of cartilage. Whereas with antelope, it's actually physically part of the skull that grows, and then it's covered in keratin or hardened hair, similar to fingernails. So the construction of the horns, one being permanent and for life, and growing for life as well. A big kudu male can grow. His horns only reaches its full sort of massive size at age 9 or 10 even. So that would be the main difference. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there's some smaller physiological differences, but as far as I've always understood, that's the main thing between deer and antelope. And then I think there's also a large part just a language difference. In other words, people tend to refer to deer and antelope. It's not necessarily so much of a taxonomical scientific difference, but I'm not enough of a scientist, or not even nearly enough of a scientific approach to things to answer that for you further than the obvious horns. Keep in mind the word antelope, or the name antelope, means large eyes or beautiful eyes. But then again, Bambi's a deer, but his eyes are also large and beautiful. So I don't think that necessarily reflects in the difference. What is that? The one with forehead that stuck out, looked like a Frankenstein. Yeah, interesting observation. The well-observed bluebird. I don't know if you have your normal name as well. I always feel strange referring to people with their avatars. What Bluebird's mentioning is that both the males were marking. So as they were moving, both of them were scent marking and leaving a scent. So it shows that the male, call him Yambilu for now, was not, he was not backing away. He didn't just run away and disappear. They were sort of more of face-off with each other. Now keep in mind, the area that we were on there with Mafufunyan is right on the riverbed. And it's very seldom that in fact almost never, that we see Mafufunyan anything further north or northeast from there. So Mafufunyan's area, if you look at the map of Djuma, you've got the Mulwati riverbed running sort of northish if you want, and Mafufunyan uses that as a boundary. Gowrie Main a little bit down towards Chitwasar, but then going north and west, he goes around Treehouse Dam, typically cut straight across like he did this morning. His tracks went Voitila Access, which is further north than normal. But the southwestern part of Gowrie is sort of the extent of Mafufunyan's territory. So this other male is more on the edge of it. So it's not so much that he's in the middle of the territory busy mating with one of the potential females, in which case there would be a huge fight. But it's more a case of just on the edge of it. So maybe they're just figuring out, where their boundary lies. Where am I going to accept you, and where are you going to accept me, and where am I going to tell you that you're too close, and how much will you push back when we do that? So there's a bit of a face-off there, rather than saying, I need you out of here. It's more just saying, where are our boundaries with each other? That's the way I would interpret that. Let me just quickly read these two. Fight, retain. Yeah, if he wants to retain his territory, eventually will have to fight. Leopards eventually have to fight every so often for territory, and eventually they get ousted or killed in the process. The ghost in the darkness is an interesting question. 2 huge male lions that were killing the rail workers. Okay, just a question here from Ems again, asking about the 2 male lions that were portrayed in the Ghost in the Darkness. 2 huge male lions were killing rail workers in East Africa. They were killed and put into a museum in Africa. Well, just wondering if you knew of those males or heard of them. Ems, and I might be wrong on this, but I'm 99.9% sure. One thing I'm 100% sure of. First of all, very interesting question. Sorry, it's an interesting story that. First of all, those males didn't have manes. They were maneless lions, which is quite interesting. You do get that sometimes. They had a very, very small fluff, almost like a juvenile lion. Obviously, for the movie, they portrayed them with big manes because it just makes a better story. But one of the interesting things were those man-eaters, and they truly were man-eaters. I don't know the stats. You can Google it probably. They ate a lot of people. I want to say 100 and something even over time. But it was a very weird scenario. I'm not going to go into that now. That's a whole hour conversation. Keep in mind, on the railway, with people that knew little about wildlife back then, you have a lot of people that move along with the railway. It's a movable thing. They've got a lot of waste and food waste and carcass waste. They had to slaughter their own cattle all the time. So there were a whole lot of things to attract hyenas and lions and all kinds of things. And then, over that, all kinds of behavior from the people that maybe attracted the lions more. And eventually the lions learned that this was a possible food source. So it wasn't just a case of lions walking up and saying, oh, there's people, let's start eating them. It was a circumstantial thing as well. Same as you find in some other places where you develop man-eaters. So first of all, no manes on them. Secondly, I've seen those lions in the Museum of Natural History in New York. And this is where I'm 99.9% sure. Maybe my memory has failed me. It was the first time I went to New York was in 95. I've been there a few times since, but in 95 I actually spent some time in the Museum of Natural History. And for those of you that are maybe from New York, or if you're visiting there, go have a look. As far as I know, those man-eaters are actually on display in New York. Quite often you find a lot of treasures from a lot of parts of the world are in display in other countries. So yeah, interesting bit of history on those lions, and I'm sure there's lots of it on the internet. It's a fascinating story. The whole railway system as well, building the bridge over it. Just a quick question there from Karen. People wondering about how long something up in walls. I'm not quite understanding, Karen, sorry. The log, wondering about a log or something up. Not quite understanding that. I presume it's something we saw at some stage in a hole. Karen, sorry, I'm not quite understanding the question. Oh, okay. Are we referring to the fireside chat? If I'm understanding correctly. Whoa, there's a lot of things going past. The Janet. Guys, actually, Pete mentioned to me this photograph, and I'll go have a look, but Pete said it looked like the Janet. That was what Karen referring to. Apparently, while we were talking around the fire, the Janet came up a few times, and that's very, very possible. Often when we make fire, the Janet comes along. He knows that we're going to fry some meat afterwards. And I also believe there was a comment from someone that thought we had an animal on the fire. We didn't have an animal on the fire. We did do after fireside chat, every fireside chat, we normally have a bit of a barbecue afterwards, with, I guess, some bits of animal on it, a bit of sausage or chops and so on, but we didn't have anything on the fire. It's just a log with a root base. So the thing that looked a bit weird was actually the roots that were part of the log. Yeah, the genet often hangs around the fence. I'm sure it was the genet that was around. Question from Carmen, just going into man-eaters. Pride of lions that specialize in refugees or people walking across the border from Mozambique. I wouldn't necessarily say they specialize in them. They would also eat a whole variety of other things. They would obviously catch their typical prey, waterbuck and lion, wildebeest and so forth. But certainly that's the case. A lot of the people that walk across, and it's a very long, very hard, from a humanitarian point of view, that's a whole other conversation, but typically do it at night, and typically do it, while they may be physically quite weak themselves, and so on. So those lions do catch them sometimes, and do eat them sometimes, which is obviously horrible, but it's also, again, it's a situation that's arrived because of political reasons and because of other reasons, human-based, that made people walk through the bush at night. And a cat at night is much more confident. A lion can follow a person and lose a bit of its fear and get more confident. And if it does that again and again, eventually one day it's going to run up and try the person, and then it's going to see it's easy to catch, and human has got very little teeth to bite back with, no nails, it's quite weak, we can't fight back, and then that lion will try it again. And if the lion tries it again and again, eventually it's going to get more confident, and eventually it'll allow its cubs to learn it, and then it becomes a learned hunt. The same as lions learn to hunt buffalo. You get lions that don't hunt buffalo because they've never learned it. So it's, again, a very circumstantial thing where you can blame the lions for it, but more likely we should just blame the political conditions in this case that force people to walk across a border. Okay, well, Karen says again, the object never moved during the conversation. In that case, Karen, it wouldn't have been the genet. I'll try and have a look at this picture when Pete gets back this afternoon, chat to him. If it never moved, then it would not have been the genet. With the genet, we see in camp often enough, and when it's around, then it obviously moves around every now and again. So, unless there were two different things, maybe there was an object. There are some logs behind us in amongst the fence, but the genet also does move around. We saw it the night before as well. So, not quite sure which one that is.